Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, I got a gun pointed at my head by an HOA Karen that claimed my farm devalued her property. I'm not even part of this HOA. Let's dive right into the video. So to clarify, this story happened in the Philippines. I spent a couple decades living on a mixed-use property before an HOA had even bothered to try and start up there. I was there long before them, and once they arrived they had zero idea how to handle who I was and what I was doing with my life. Now, for those of you who are from the suburbs, a mixed-use property means that my land is used for both commercial and residential use. My farming area and then my house and yard where I live. I even have a second fence to my home just to make it extra clear that the farm and my house are technically not under the same types of guidelines. I had to get the short end of the straw with the headed Karen of the HOA moving into a house right next to me and my farm. Even when she was not talking directly to me, I could hear her complaining and moaning about how bad the smell was and the noises that came from my tractor and barn. And of course, whenever she saw me, she felt the need to insult it directly to my face. I won't like and say that farms are all great smells and sounds. Karen was not wrong in her statements because it smelled like manure, animals and loud machines were working. However, I feel zero empathy because there was no way she did not know she was moving in next to a farm. What she wanted me to do was join her HOA so that she could control me with rules. There were just two major problems with this that Karen could not manage to squeeze into her tiny little brain. The first and biggest one being that I did not have to join anything if I didn't want to. I had the freedom to decide on my own if I wanted to be a part of her little club. Legally, there's no current way to force a previous owner into an HOA that I have ever heard of. And well, Ripe stars, I suppose none legally speaking. The only way to force someone to do that might be to point a gun at their head, but I hope that won't happen to anyone, of course. Anyway, the second thing was that even if I did join, it would not solve anything. Let's pretend for a second that I joined the HOA and had to follow all of their rules. Well, I have a mixed property and the H in HOA stands for homeowner. I even tried to explain that to her. Since it's a mixed property, my farm would never have to follow a single rule from the HOA. It was out of reach because it was commercial. That's like if a supermarket was built within the HOA boundaries and Karen expected them to join and also follow all the same rules homes need to. In her mind, I had no idea what I was talking about, and the only thing I was good for was digging up after animals. The funny thing that I don't have a better place to point out is that I can also see from the things that she buys that she is one of those people that are very into whole organic foods. I see her all the time at the local farmers market and having no idea that the things she is buying are coming directly from my farm. Since I don't often go and instead have a worker that deals with the selling there for me. Karen did not calm down and actually seemed to get angrier over time. The calmer I acted towards her, the more she would turn red in the face. It became a little fun for me to see her at my door yet again to complain about the same things. This one time was the thing that started to escalate everything. She was ranting that I needed to get a new job because I was ruining the entire neighborhood for everybody. That I could just get a regular job and then come home and even try to compromise. I could have a small vegetable garden or something. I refused as usual, but this time she threatened that she was going to make me pay. Now, in money or violence, I didn't know at the time and did not ask. Then the police kept showing up to my house after getting a bunch of false reports. I think the craziest of them all was that Karen called the police claiming that I was burning and creating a sacrifice out of one of my cows in the street. Like, she was not even trying to make it sound realistic, but if you call claiming there's a fire, especially, the police cannot just not show up. I'm sure some officer out there has responded to a cow being sacrificed before. She also started to make sad attempts at vandalizing my farm. Crappy spray paint that was just lines, trying to break a fence but only getting like a post broken, things like that. I just installed cameras to get some proof that she was doing this so the police could force her to stop. The only big thing she did at that point that bothered me was trying to harass anybody that came to my farm to do business, shouting insults at me in order to scare them off and for me to lose business. None of that compares to what she actually had the dumb idea to do as her grand finale. She came to my house again, but this time decided to bring a gun with her and pointed at me. Well, I have guns too, but they are all on the farm property and not in the house. It made my wife feel better when she was alive that way, and it stuck out of a habit. I had cameras though, so I closed the door on her, gun and all, and called the police. They arrested her on the spot for possession of an illegal firearm and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. The state was gonna prosecute her heavily, and I was able to keep up the best I could with her case as it was moving forward. Since I was not the one directly suing her or something, I was not really there except for one day that they wanted me to make a statement. Maybe I could have shown up for the rest, not really sure. It turns out though that Karen had more than just an illegal gun. In fact, she used to have a gun license, but it was revoked 2 years prior because of inappropriate and erratic behavior. Nothing like murder, but getting drunk, waving it around, shooting it in the air, etc. Enough that looking back I found out that her ability to possess a gun was taken away from her and she got put under some kind of probation. One she did finish, so she was not in a violation of that on top of everything else. Still, past crap like that gets taken into account and there was no chance she could get away with what she did here. That did not stop a Karen from trying to get a lawyer to defend herself and claim that despite video evidence and police being on the scene that she didn't do it. Claiming that I started and was the one with the gun pointing it at her. Then I magically stopped the video, got the gun in her hands pointed at me and turned the video back on. There was nothing she could do and the HOA she led was in no way backing her up on any of this. They wanted to pretend none of them even knew her, and they were just as shocked that she would do something like that as I was. A couple days after the final court date, I was able to see the sentencing that she was given. She got multiple years in prison after being found guilty of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, as well as illegal possession and use of a firearm. I wish I was there that day because I could just imagine her trying to argue something like the judge not being good at his job or her court-appointed lawyer setting her up. I find myself lucky that since then nobody in charge of the HOA has tried to harass me in the way that Karen did. I made it clear that I don't want to be a member and they respect that and leave me alone now. That doesn't mean I don't get along with the community though, because when we had a little festival party, I was happy to hand over a bunch of apples for some ladies that wanted to make free pie for everybody. This story is a malicious compliance story. So I worked for this tech company for almost 7 years. It was my first job out of college, great company, huge growth, great benefits, and most importantly, an incredible boss. The boss was super helpful and responsive, always had the team's back, goes out of his way to not micromanage, did not care as long as the work got done, borderline forced people to take PTO. We got unlimited and I averaged 30 to 40 days off a year, and believed in giving good workers big raises and promotions. Last 3 years I got 9%, 13% and a promotion and 7% raises. We worked remotely through the pandemic and I asked to change my contract to fully remote so I could leave the high cost of living city where the office was based to go back to my hometown. My boss approved the change, and when HR tried to do a COL adjustment to my salary, my boss told them no because I'll be doing the same work in my new location. The boss was so good that on our team of 16 people, the lowest tenured was 3.5 years. I had been offered several other jobs with salary increases throughout the year but could never bring myself to leave. Myself and one other person on my team had specialized into working on very complex and involved projects. These were significantly different than the team's normal day-to-day work. We had been doing the complex projects for 4+ years and were the knowledge base for the company in that area. Boss left that area completely to us to manage. As the volume picked up, we added and trained 2 more people to our little sub-team to help out. None of these projects went out to the customers without one of us 4 being involved. Super complex, $100,000 to millions lost if a mistake was made. And since it was the fastest growing part of the business by far, we were super busy. Now, around 2 years ago, boss's boss gets promoted from his VP role up to an SVP role. He hires a new VP. This new VP comes in and tries to change a lot very quickly. Tries to make everything a trackable metric even where it really doesn't make sense. In other words, tracking the number of projects each person on my team did every month. Counted as 1 even if it was super complex and took 2 weeks, or if it was very simple with an existing customer and took an hour. He wanted each project to go out faster, even if they were not due for a week, we were supposed to get them out in under 3 days. Also tried to force my boss to assign work to the team instead of us all picking up from a central queue as we could, etc, etc. The boss pushed back as much as possible, but was getting crap on constantly by the new VP because the useless metrics VP wanted us tracked by did not meet his super unrealistic expectations. Despite my boss's team being the most experienced and efficient in the company and doing significantly more volume and more complex work than any other team. About 9 months ago, boss had enough of just getting consistently crapped on by VP and took a new job and left. And by the way, boss had been with the company for 13 years and was one of the first few 100 employees. My whole team was devastated. We all instantly started lobbying for the most tenured person on our team to get promoted into that role, as she would have the same philosophy as the boss that just left. VP interviews most tenured and a bunch of external candidates, and then goes with someone from his previous company. Now this lady will be referred to as BITCH boss, aka Karen, from here on out for soon to be obvious reasons. She came in and completely destroyed the team from top to bottom, changed processes that had been perfected for years, did not listen or care about what anyone else had to say. Also started micromanaging to the extreme. Team morale dropped like a rock. It took less than a month for the team's output to crater due to all of her changes. And the team from the best in the company to the worst. It took Karen about 2 months to get to my smaller sub-team and tried to rework our processes too. Karen started micromanaging projects, having no idea what she was doing and causing all kinds of issues and delays. She started getting on us about our metrics being the worst on the team, despite us working on the super complex projects that took 10 to 100 times longer on average than most of the work the rest of the team did. Karen boss told us that if we did not meet the expected metrics, we would be put on PIPs. And by the way, PIP means Performance Improvement Plan. Anyway, so we decided to comply and focused all of our efforts on simple projects to meet the metric, aka X number of projects completed per month per person, and left the complex ones sitting in the queue. This caused chaos as my small sub-team suddenly stopped picking up complex projects and just focused on completing simple ones to get the metrics up. Very quickly, the sales team is freaking out because deals are getting delayed and their huge commission checks from the complex projects are being put in jeopardy. When they came to us to ask when we were going to complete the complex projects, we all gave the same response. Karen has told us we have to focus all of our efforts on meeting metric X, so we will only be doing that. Unfortunately, that means we can no longer complete the complex projects. Please contact Karen for help getting them completed. This did not go over well with her or VP, as he started to get complaints as well. They called a meeting and told us that we had to go back to doing the complex projects. We refused, as that made it impossible to meet the metrics they created to measure our performance. They refused to drop the metric but still insisted we work on the complex ones, as we were the only ones with the knowledge. We still refused. This resulted in a lot more complaints from sales until the SVP got involved. The SVP was the one who created the complex sub-team to begin with and sided with us against the VP and Karen boss. He said we were not to be measured by the metrics and can go back to managing the complex stuff without fear of being put on a PIP. So we did. At this point, the other 3 people on the sub-team had seen the writing on the wall and were all actively applying and trying to leave ASAP. They were all office-based in the high cost of living area still. The BITCH boss, aka Karen, changed her team from come in 1 to 2 days a week as needed to mandatory 3 days in the office most company policy would let her. So they got a lot more of her BS than I did remote. I'd not been applying because I was distracted. My old boss had approved 2 weeks of vacation for my wedding/honeymoon before he left. This happened to occur about 3 months after Karen boss started, and about a month after the whole PIP blow-up. Karen boss was pissed at how we showed her up in front of the SVP and was doing everything she could to make our life miserable. In that month, the other super experienced guy and my best friend on the sub-team got a new job and left, no notice, and one of the other guys on the sub-team has put in his notice and only had a week left. We were already slammed and still behind from the PIP fiasco, so losing half the sub-team just made that worse. Plus, with morale so low, we did not bother to put in any extra effort anymore. In fact, the whole team was significantly behind, as 6 of the 16 people had left or were on their notice periods at that point. So Karen boss decided that she was cancelling my already approved wedding leave because of how far the team was behind. She told me over Zoom. I told her that there was no chance I'm missing my wedding and honeymoon for work, and I'm taking the full leave, and it's up to her if she wants to lose another person from the sub-team for 2 weeks or permanently. She BS'd, yelled and threatened until I just left the Zoom call. She followed up with an email officially notifying me my leave was cancelled, and if I didn't show up it would be considered job abandonment. I called her bluff and replied CCing VP and SVP and some other sales VPs who I worked with regularly, explaining the situation. It's my wedding honeymoon and that I appreciated the opportunity but was quitting immediately with no notice due to the disrespect from Karen boss. I got Slack messages from SVP and several of the sales VPs almost immediately asking me not to quit. The email chain itself blew up with complaints about how my team was mismanaged by Karen and how now more complex deals were going to get lost because I would not be there at all to work on them. SVP eventually shut it down, but it was a fun read. I did not reply to the Slack messages or do any work the rest of the day, just turned everything off and went to a bar and had a good time. I woke up the next day late in the morning and very hungover to a few voicemails on my phone from SVP asking me to call him. I called back in the early afternoon and talked to the SVP. He was very understanding, asked me to come back, listen to all my complaints and eventually made an offer. Basically, if I came back and worked the rest of the week and tried to train a few team members to work on complex stuff to cover while I was gone, he would give me a $3,000 wedding bonus, I would get my full PTO, and when I got back, Karen would leave me alone and let me manage the complex stuff and pick 2 more people to permanently train back onto the sub-team to backfill what we had lost. I accepted because weddings are really expensive. So I tried to train people to cover for me, which is an impossible task, and then leave on my PTO. I had a great wedding and honeymoon. VP called me a few times when the 4th guy from my sub-team quit with no notice about 1.5 weeks in, but I ignored him and did not respond. I came back refreshed and ready for the crap show I know is waiting. It was absolute chaos. All the salespeople were slacking and emailing me about all the complex things they needed done 2 weeks ago. The people I quickly trained before leaving had not been able to do almost anything. There was a huge backlog for the entire team, as half of the original 16-person team was gone at this point. I turned off my Slack and emailed the sales VPs directly asking them to give me a prioritized list of all the complex deals they needed done. Got the list and started working through it in my normal working hours, nothing more. Karen never tried to talk to me or interfere, VP did a few times though. At one point he tried to make me work weekends to catch up. I refused. This went on for about a month or so. Karen boss never mentioned me training people to replace my sub-team and I never brought it up. They did however have the larger team try some of the smaller complex projects to help get them out. They also hired some new people for the larger team. The normal 4 to 6 month training process my old boss developed was ignored and the new hires were just thrown in the deep end. This resulted in new hires making mistakes that cost the company a lot of money. This brought us to annual bonus and raise time. I'd started frantically job hunting as soon as I got back from the honeymoon. I got some interviews, was in some later stages, but no offers yet. I had a Zoom meeting invite from Karen boss to go over my bonus and raise. She decided it would be a great idea to give me 80% of my expected bonus, lowest possible, and a 0% raise. She justified it with a bunch of BS, me not being a team player supposedly, metrics being bad, blaming me for mistakes made by new hires, etc. I did not really argue or care at that point. At that point I really quit, quietly. So I cut my daily output to below half, just did the bare minimum, and waited for the bonus to come in with my next paycheck 2 weeks later. At this point the sales team is getting pissed because the complex stuff basically is not getting done here. I had almost caught up on the important ones before the raise and bonus, but with me barely working, everything was falling behind again. Karen boss smelled weakness and showed up on one of the progress calls I had with sales. The project was running about 1.5 weeks behind at that point. She started chewing me out on the call in front of everyone, saying I was lazy and not doing my job, etc. I let her rant and then just said, if you give me the lowest bonus possible and a 0% raise, you get 0% effort in return. You can complete this project since I'm so terrible at my job. And then I left the call. She tried a few more times on email chains, etc. to call me out for not working, and I just replied with the same thing. I refused to join her Zoom calls or respond to her on Slack. I just responded with the 0% effort blurb on every email. This infuriated her. I still had not gotten another job offer but was really confident I was about to get one soon. So when VP set up a Zoom call with me, I joined. He tried to play nice and ask what the problems were and pretended to be on my side. I told him for a 0% raise I'm giving 0% effort and he pretended like he had no idea how I ended up with that raise and bonus. He has to approve the bonus raise amounts by the way. I of course called him out on his BS and told him he gets what he pays for. He then threatened to fire me if I did not go back to my old level of output and said the people I'd been training in complex projects could take over for me soon, so I was not as necessary as I thought. I laughed and asked him what he was talking about. I hadn't been training anyone. He went quiet and muted. He was clearly messaging Karen asking about the training. Because he unmuted a few minutes later and changed his entire attitude. Agreed it was awful of Karen to do that to my bonus and raise, and asked what he could do to make it right. I didn't care at that point and knew he needed me more than I needed him, so I told him I needed 25% raise and 150% of the bonus on that new salary, or I was quitting immediately. He tried to say that was ridiculous and could never happen, etc. So I bluffed and told him I already had another job offer and was leaving anyway. He asked me to wait and he would bring SVP onto the call. SVP tried to talk my demand down. At that point I realized it was not worth it. I refused a significantly lower counteroffer, thanked the SVP for everything he did for me, and said that I was quitting immediately. VP tried to say I'll never get a good reference if I don't at least work a notice period. I just told him my ex-boss would give me a glowing recommendation of my time here, so I didn't care and logged off. SVP tried to get me to come back a few times over the next week or so, but I refused. A few weeks later, I got a job offer and accepted. I've been working at the new company for a while now, and it's been pretty crappy. Better than the old company, but nowhere close to what I had before with my old boss. Although old boss reached out and said he might have a position opening up in his new company in a month or two that I should apply for, so I'm looking forward to that. I've heard from people who are still on my old team that it's a complete disaster at my old job. They are losing millions from not having the knowledge base to correctly complete the complex projects. They reached out to the other experienced guy from the sub-team and offered him a huge raise to come back after I quit, but he refused. Everyone left on my old team is trying to leave ASAP, and everything, even the simple stuff, is weeks overdue. Apparently Karen is getting thrown under the bus by VP and will be fired soon. And yeah, Ripestars, obviously I only hope the worst for this awful Karen boss and only the best for OP. I would say things kind of turned out alright in the end, but I kind of like this story because it is really realistic compared to some other malicious compliance stories that sometimes have too much of a happy ending. Although I gotta say, one thing I will never understand is, if you own a company, why aren't you willing or able to compensate your employees fairly, especially if they do such a good job as OP? Completely insane if you ask me. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripestories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.